All right. Good morning, everybody. First, I'd like to thank you all for attending our ongoing Tech Insights webinar series. The webinar topic today is how to build a security plan for Microsoft 365 and Azure. Microsoft 365's go-to application for all things Office-related. It's critical to keep your data safe and secure up there. Microsoft Azure is the premier cloud-based platform for your business, and we're even going to sneak in some info on securing Teams and Teams calling as a bonus. I'm Leo Reed, Senior Partner here at IT Resource. I'm pleased to be joined today with my co-founder and additional Senior Partner, Mr. Gary Lutz.
Good morning, everyone.
And as always, if at any time during the webinar you have a question, please feel free to type it in the question box on the WebEx screen, and we will do our best to get those answers at the end of the presentation. By attending today's webinar, you'll be entered into a drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card. First, a little bit about IT Resource. Gary and I began this adventure in 2000 with the intention of providing a single source for all business technology needs. Budgeting, consulting, hardware and software, design, procurement, managed services, you name it. We are focused on providing your company top quality personal service in the most cost-effective manner possible. So with that, let's jump right into the fun. Are we ready for fun? I'm ready for fun.
I'm ready for fun.
So here's today's topics. Security resources from Microsoft, the FFIEC, CISA, etc. That's going to be a deep dive into that. Microsoft 365 Security Architecture Overview. Securing 365 and Azure steps, how-to make that happen. Securing Microsoft Teams, Teams calling. Recommended third-party security integrations is a critical one coming up. And a recap and question and answer period. So as you might imagine, we got a lot to get to, so I'm going to stop yip-yapping and get this moving. But first, a couple of little details for you. This chart comes from Microsoft, but it's interesting to look at some of this stuff. This is going to be included in the PowerPoint that we'll provide to anyone who asks for it. And if you want a copy, feel free to ask. But some interesting other tidbits, 1.2 billion devices are updated monthly. That's a lot of devices.
Yep.
And they scan 470 billion emails Microsoft does every month. So there's a lot going on in that regard to making sure that everybody stays safe and secure. So this is an interesting chart to share with your security team and with your end users as well. So don't hesitate to share that around your company. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Gary Lutz. Take her away, Gary.
All right, here we are. So let's talk about 365 security resources. A lot on this slide. I'm not going to go through everything. There's actually a lot in this webinar. So it is going to be more of a technical, but at the same time, I hope that anybody that's on here can gain something from this on the security that you should be thinking about Microsoft 365 and Azure, and as well as basically the requirements to keep your data safe. There are a lot of resources available with the 365. I had a few of them listed here, but really, depending on what organization you have, the security that you should match should be about your regulatory compliance or your type of organization. So there's specific information here. There's information for banks. I know we have some bankers on the line today, but there's also, this is good for everybody because everybody is being targeted at this day and age. So there's some resources that are, parts of these were used for this presentation today. So here's how we really want to look at Microsoft security architecture. This is kind of the primer for understanding how you can set up security in Microsoft 365 and Azure. We have different pillars in here. So the way that Microsoft's got the architecture is we have Azure Active Directory, and think of that as identity, okay? The Azure Active Directory is the identity, and anything that's an identity is a user, a group, a device, shared mailbox, et cetera. Then they have the Security Center and the Information Security. So Azure Active Directory and Identity Security is different than securing your information and your data, okay? So, which is the second pillar. The other final pillar, I will call it, is the Compliance Center. So if you've done everything right at your identity securing, and you've done everything right with your information securing, then your Compliance Center is going to allow you to manage and manage your risk and ensure that you're following those security metrics and compliance. So that is where the Compliance Center comes on. It really is the end game of understanding if you are secure and how secure you are. One other thing that I'm going to add in here is a fourth pillar, and this is with the advanced security. So we're kind of moving beyond, in some respect, what you can do internally with your team for securing and the compliance to the advanced security features that Microsoft Office 365 and Azure actually do support. There's a whole nother level of advanced security that Microsoft can provide to you. So these are the three pillars we're going to talk about, or four pillars, I should say, today, to get you an idea of what you should be doing to secure Microsoft. So the first thing is, and again, the reason I say those pillars is because you have to start with your identities. So the first step is to secure your people, secure your devices, secure those. And the best way to do that is to integrate your Azure Active Directory. Everything in Office 365, Microsoft 365, and Azure, everything is built on Azure Active Directory, okay? So the best thing you want to do is integrate that. If you have an on-premise Windows Active Directory where your people are logging into, every day they log into their computer, if that's in a domain, you want that domain tightly integrated, and we're going to show in the next slide how to do that. But you want that to be tightly integrated because that is where the security starts. You also want to implement some form of multi-factor authentication for all accounts, okay? Not just administrator accounts. Every account out there is important to have MFA.
Yeah, we can't beat that drum hard enough. We see many customers that have not yet implemented MFA, and it's 2021, folks, and everybody's looking.
Yep.
So.
Yep. A lot of them will say, well, just for the administrator accounts. No, all the accounts need to have multi-factor. And we are going to make it easy. We're going to talk to you about conditional access to make it easy. This all plays in together to make it easy for your folks to actually use it, but very, very secure. The other thing is to use dedicated administrator accounts separate from user accounts. That's really key because you don't want just standard user accounts to be able to have elevated privileges. So that's a step one for securities. We're going to talk about device management, conditional access, and then a little note about Microsoft security defaults here. Again, device isn't an entity, or it's an identity. It's a device. It's something. Okay, so that's why it's included in the identity. It's not data. It's a device. Microsoft security defaults. Microsoft came through with this about a year and a half ago, maybe, and you can actually do a one checkbox that enables Microsoft security defaults. This really is good for probably for your smaller accounts, accounts that aren't very, very intricate, or maybe non-compliant organizations can use these defaults because they do basically everything to keep you as safe as possible. And it's available to even the cheapest, the free account, it's available to do that. And what that will do is turn on MFA. It blocks legacy authentication, so you can't log in, using username and password without MFA. And so that's a default that you can use. We're going to go beyond that, but it is available out there. So at a minimum, people should have that.
And with free Azure Active Directory, there's no excuse. You got to have it. It's
Yep.
the first step in the successful securing your identity.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about, so here's how these slides are laid out. What this will do is this will give you the how. So even if you're not, I guess, your IT guy or your IT team, you can take this and say, here's where you go to do this. And this is, great information. So I'm actually showing where the portal is, where you go to do exactly what we're telling on this, because this is a how-to webinar. But what you want to do is to integrate your Azure Active Directory. You have to choose your Active Directory integration type, okay? And we have some minimum recommended, but what this is doing is this is connecting your on-premise with your Azure Active Directory so that you can have a single sign-on and single point of identity security. Okay, that's really important to secure Office 365. So the federated is the most secure, but I will tell you, and I'll tell you, a lot of banks use this. You do need to have a staff to manage this because you're going to have extra servers, you're going to have extra things in your environment to support this. But the one thing to note about that, federated means that Microsoft, for every login, Microsoft is coming back to your servers in your Active Directory Even every cloud login technically can come back to your Active Directory on site and say, is this accurate and will it work? So, should I let them in? So that's the most secure, but of course, that is, not always necessary for everybody else. The one that we would recommend to be at this level would be the password, pass-through authentication, seamless SSO, and password sync for the hash. So what that does is that basically sets you up to, it is absolutely connecting back to your Active Directory, but it will kind of cache the passwords and make sure that they're all in sync. And so it is the most secure way to do it without putting servers on premise. So that's the one we recommend, okay? And there's a little chart, handy little chart out there too, Microsoft provides to figure this out. But the second thing is when you set up your Azure Active Directory Connect, because that's how you do it to connect your system together, you want to make sure that you do a standby for redundancy and failover, but it's not necessary. But this will totally secure your environment. The one thing that I will say is typically there's a lot of folks who will put cloud-only accounts out there. And so they have all these accounts in their Office 365 that don't connect back to the Active Directory. Those are where things get exposed because these accounts, then people outside can actually try to connect in. And if you don't have accounts out there like that, they can't because it's only the ones in your Active Directory. So very important. The break glass admin is just in case you lose connectivity between your Active Directory. You do have to have a backdoor. So there is a break glass admin account that you should create.
Only to be used in case of fire.
That's exactly right. Okay. So identities are important to get it connected to your environment in order to, so you know that somebody who's logging into your network is actually the same person logging into your Office 365. You disable them on your on-prem, they're disabled in 365. That's a really good security practice. The next thing is MFA. And again, we talk about multi-factor. Multi-factor is obviously recommended, or I am say required for security. You don't have it, you're not secure. One of the things that makes it really easy is the Microsoft Authenticator app. It's free, and it comes with most of the plans. You install it, and away you go. We recommend that if you don't have something, I'm going to call it better or more advanced, like Duo or something of that nature, but that Authenticator app really does work well and keeps it secure, and it's very easy for an end user, okay? So for multi-factor, it's very, very simple to set it up and make people use a multi-factor. You can take and say, I don't want SMS, or I don't want voice call, or you can say app only. So only people with that app will actually be able to multi-factor. So I definitely recommend at the start is using the Microsoft Authenticator app for ease of deployment. Make sure you enforce MFA on all administrator accounts too. Some people say, well, that's kind of hard because they're not connected to a user. Well, what we would say is make sure you have separate administrator accounts for each user, and then tie it to a multi-factor for that person, and then you are doubly secure, right? The one thing is important is that multi-factor is your foundation for conditional access. And conditional access we're going to talk about in a minute. But the bottom line is multi-factor does not have to be difficult. It can be starting right here, and then we can make it easier and smarter for your end users as we go forward.
Multi-factor should be unconditional.
Should be, yes. So this is the next step, okay, and this is device management. We're still in identity. So there's two things. If you are going to have anybody use multi-factor on one of their mobile devices, you may want to, in fact, or if you're going to have folks access, I'm going to say Microsoft Teams, for example, on their mobile device, you really do need to have a policy, and you need to have enrollment for those devices so that you can control those devices and make sure it's who you think it is. Because once you allow that, and the device, it needs to be watched. It's bottom line. So if you're going to allow people to use it, you should actually have the device management policies. You can do this with the MDM policies, which is included with all the plans, or if you have Intune, which is kind of recommended, you can then install Intune and deploy those to your Windows devices or to your mobile devices, and you are now managing the devices. This should be the first step in securing, because now you not only know what people, identities, are trying to log in, you know what devices they're trying to log in from. And with these combination together, now you've really secured 365. Because if you say they can't log in because we're an unknown user, that's a no-brainer. But if they can't log in, don't let them log in if they don't have an agent on their device. See how secure that's going to be.
But what happens if I get a new phone or I lose my phone? Is it simple?
Yep, it's really, really easy. Actually, just go to the Intune company portal, and it literally asks you for your username, password, hits an MFA automatically, forces an MFA, goes through and makes sure that you're authorized, and then it downloads that company portal, and then you're able to manage that device inside the Office 365. And
Very cool.
Yep. So definitely the thing to do, devices. So we're still on entities. The one thing I will say is if you haven't used Intune, if you're not deploying Intune on your, I'm going to kind of quickly go through this. There's a huge amount of value in having the Intune devices because now you can actually push policies using Intune to say, here's how we're going to enforce single sign-on MFA, PINs on devices, encryption on devices, conditional access. It all stems from having either the mobile device agent or having the Intune agent running on your Windows 10 machine. This is really where the power comes in because Intune on a mobile device allows you to protect the applications and the data within the applications per user. So you can easily say you don't have access to Teams while you're on your mobile phone, but you can have access to Teams when you're on your laptop, for an example. Or you can't use OA unless you are actually on your mobile device that has it installed. These are all coming from the power of this endpoint with an Intune.
So we got a question on the list there. It says, someone wants to know what the gotchas are with multi-factor authentication. My answer is the gotchas for not having MFA are worse than the gotchas of having MFA by far.
Yes.
But there can be some gotchas with MFA.
Well, that's right. If it's not planned out, and again, it all plays in together. Okay, so if you are just allowing MFA on anybody's device to put in any one of their cell phone numbers and allowing text messages, well, that's not as secure
right.
as forcing people to enroll their device, right? Limiting your multi-factor to a set that you only want for your organization, such as push only, authenticator app only, or you have to be within these networks. If you take it to the level of including all the rest of the thought process in it, then there's very, very, very few gotchas. The thing is, it's very, very smart when you actually set this up. It knows when you're logging in on a known device or a remembered device or on a typical IP address that you've always logged in for. It's tracking and noticing that. So if you have MFA configured properly, you don't have the risk of somebody stealing a phone and then using that for MFA because
right.
you kind of lock that down. It's not going to happen.
And as soon as the user calls you and says, I lost my phone, you can lock it out and immediately it's done.
That's exactly right. Yep. So, but I guess the gotchas are not thinking it all the way through.
So one more question on BYOD is, someone has MOS 360 Mobile Device Manager. Is there an easy way to migrate the company devices to Intune so you can do policies? I wouldn't see
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. The start of there is you would want to literally start enrolling, create all your policies, create all of your device enrollment policies, and then with your Intune, get all your policies set to match your MOS 360. And then what you do is you start rolling out your Intune policies to the devices, and then you use Intune to remove
MOS 360,
and so you're really basically moving it across that way. Again, there's a lot of details in that, but no, that's a typical scenario would be migrating to Intune from other MDM solutions.
Another good question. Duo checks to make sure the end user devices have the latest patches. Does Microsoft Authenticator do that, or does it require Intune?
It requires Intune.
Yes.
I will say, though, that there are elements of Intune that are starting to be pushed in. I'll talk about this in another slide. They're being moved into some of the, I'm going to call it less expensive plans. If you don't exceed 300 users, you can look at the Microsoft Business Premium and the Microsoft 365 Enterprise. These plans are starting to roll in some of the Intune features specifically to address, so you don't have to purchase an entire suite of Intune.
That's great.
It's getting there. All right, so now we've got the devices, okay? Okay, so here's the holy grail of security because you've got the identities and you've got the devices taken care of.
We have the who and the what.
You have the who and the what. And now here's the high security how, okay? When you put in conditional access, now what happens, it enforces the same multi-factor authentications that you put in there, but it enforces them based on a lot of smarts, okay? Who is the user and where they're at? Are they on a device with an agent or they're not? What type of application are they trying to get to? Are they authorized or are they not authorized? Are they inside your network or are they outside your network? Are they inside the United States? I mean, all of these conditional access can get down to the point to where multi-factor just allows the user to log in, doesn't even prompt them for a code, unless you say always prompt for a code, because it has already identified known user, known device, known place, known network, all of that. And conditionally it says, you now can succeed in logging into the network. And that can be done where it's hands-on, where you tell them you want to have a forced MFA. But if you have all of these people inside your network, inside your office, and you know they're inside your office, and you've already logged in and already logged into Active Directory, and it detects that your 365 is Outlook that you're trying to connect to, and they're inside the network, it goes through it. It actually still checks the multi-factor, but it actually goes through and says succeeds.
Yep.
Okay, that's conditional access, and that is the holy grail on all the security. It really boils down to taking all of these signals, okay, user, where they're at, device, what are they on, what application they're trying to connect to, and is it a real-time risk? Now, one of the things Microsoft is really smart about, and this is because they have all this data, they can actually look at it and say, you know what, they checked 3 out of these, but it still looks risky to me. And they will actually, you can configure to say, what happens when there's a risky user? Should you make them multi-factor? Should you make them change your password? Should you make them do additional validation? It's all can be built in within the conditional access.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's really nice stuff. And I'll tell you that right there really lets you sleep at night, because even if something just kind of smells fishy, Office 365 will say, yeah, you know, I'm going to make you, you know, prove that you are who you are. All right. So that's where you really want to do. So
from the admin side, it's sure nice to have that conditional access, so it's less involved for the IT staff when you get 50 calls and say, my MFA is not working. Well, conditional access will help you avoid those calls.
Absolutely. So the second step, and of course I want to make sure we have time for everything, but the second step, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, is really about securing the data. Identities is one thing. That's more, let's call that an operational. Operationally, you need to secure the identities of the devices. You need to have plans to make sure anybody who's in there stays out, okay? Securing the data is the next step, because really what this is saying is any information that's stored in Office 365, I want to make sure that it's protected both from within the organization, who can access it and who can't, and also to make sure it doesn't get out of the organization. And the third one really is, so that somebody doesn't delete it and either maliciously or accidentally, there's protections. That all boils down to your Azure Information Protection or your standard DLP policies. There's external access sharing. So in other words, you have to turn off and disable external data sharing by default, okay, and then turn it only on when you need to. But it really boils down to 3 things, and that is classifying your information, your data, creating labels, configuring your data loss prevention based on the labels, and configuring data retention policies, how long to keep them, based on your labels.
Right.
So when you talk about securing your data, it really is, it sounds very, very complex, but it really boils down to turn off external data sharing for sure. Don't let people accidentally take a document that's got confidential information and put it in a Teams meeting that they've invited a guest with and said, hey, check this out. Okay.
Check it out, everybody's payroll information, yay.
Yep, exactly.
So.
So you disable that by default and only turn on when you can or need to. You classify all your information so that there's sensitivity and retention labels, and then you configure what you want done with that data. Never let it go. Let it go after 7 years, whatever the case is, okay? That, in a nutshell, is securing the data.
All right, so we're done with step 2. Let's go to step 3.
I got a little, here's a quick little thing of, here's how you share, or you turn off external data sharing in each one of those. So there you go. Step 3, okay, securing Azure, okay? Now, I'm not gonna there's not step by step, but here's really about securing Azure that you need to know, okay? Azure is built like your own internal network, all right? So there are things like resources, and there are virtual machines, and there are networks, and there are locations for storage.
Virtual gateways.
There's backup storage, and there's machines running out there, and there's Active Directory domain controllers, and then there's Azure Active Directory itself, which has all of the users. So it comes down to, when you're securing Azure, you're configuring your security roles and your access controls over the resources within Azure, all right? That's the operational side of that. So it's really important to secure your subscriptions. If you let everybody and every admin in your organization review every one of your subscriptions out in Azure, you're giving them access to everything within that subscription, whether you meant to or not. So any data stored in there, any servers running in there, any of that kind of stuff, if they're an owner of that subscription, they basically can do what they want. So what you want to do is, when you're looking at securing Azure per se, you want to just think of it as limit your subscriptions to who needs access,
yep,
and then do role-based, limit access to the resource groups and storage resources, limit access to your networks and virtual machines. And what I started saying is, consider the Azure resources same as an internal network. You have a firewall, and you have switches, and you have possibly wireless access points, and you have storage, and you have servers on an on-premise environment, okay? That's a traditional environment. You wouldn't let your users, or even all of your people in the IT team, or, get access to every single one of them. You wouldn't open up your firewall to every single person who's on IT, because they don't have the capabilities, the credentials, the training to be able to do it. So consider the Azure resources exactly the same. So give your network people access to the networks, your firewall people access to security. Your security officers there's a specific role in both Office 365 and Azure for security officers. So there's a specific role that allows them to see what they need to see and change possibly policies, but not mess things up at the infrastructure, because that's completely different roles. So Azure is, there's a lot out there, but it really boils down to, that's how you control security in Azure. Does that make sense, Mr. Leo?
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to do a quick review. Top 5 security musts. You must have MFA for all your 365 logins. Turn off your external sharing. Configure your device management. You can't really get to conditional access until you have both MFA and mobile device of some sort, or Intune. And then limit your Office 365 services and applications, whether it's Outlook, OA, Teams, the list goes on and on and on, okay? Limit to only the verified identities using conditional access. Users with MFA, devices with the proper whatever, and only approved locations or networks. You can do a combination of all 3. Or you can say, if you're at this location, let you in. Or you can say, if you're at this location and you're on a device, you can be let in. You get the gist. And then finally, configure some sort of data loss prevention or protection, okay, to secure your data. So the last thing on the security auditing side is here is really what, I guess the end of it is, looking and seeing that your security policies that you put in place are actually working. And this is where you put in additional things. 365 and Azure, they already have sign-in risk policies for users, risky users, policies. It's just a matter of either just turning them on. You can turn on the default. Okay.
It's a checkbox, man.
It's a checkbox. But what that does then is or you can configure it, puts you in control. Yeah. But that's in the compliance center, is where you start to take those next steps and go, yeah, I want to watch this stuff. And that's where you do, some of your additional things like e-discovery and data investigation.
And whether you're subjected to auditing from a financial regulator or whatever, it's good to do the auditing anyway, just to make sure that what you say you do actually happens.
Yep.
So don't skip this step.
Yep. Now, one of the things going to advanced security, which is next, turning on alerting for critical events and turning on the auditing and audit log search and all these features that you turn on will allow you to go to the next step and that is the advanced security and threat protection. Being able to utilize that, okay? So Microsoft watches a lot, obviously, and what they do is they take that and they provide you with advanced threat protection policies. You can get into anti-phishing, anti-malware, safe attachments, all of that kind of stuff, anti-spam, advanced filtering. It typically requires additional licensing, but it is included in some of the Microsoft 365 plans. If you're on Office 365 plans, for example, like Office 365 E3, you don't get as much of the advanced threat as if you were on the Microsoft 365 Enterprise E3, for example. And then they throw in all of these additional ATP policy capabilities. Yep. So the bottom line is the next layer of security is in these advanced, and they're usually more, but not if they're in a plan. What you get out of this, though, is you may be able to, and I'll say may be able to, there's a lot of folks that use third-party applications, we're going to talk about those, to do some of these things. And it's fine. I mean, we love Zix AppRiver to get in front of Office 365. The integration is great. However, you also could use Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection and get not all, but a lot of the same features. You just have to, turn things on. You really have to know where to go in the Microsoft security in order to turn that on. Companies like Zix and AppRiver make it really, really easy because it's, they've been doing it for years and years and years. But for Microsoft, if they have it and they have all those capabilities, it's really about making sure that you turn it on. So that's called the Advanced Security and Threat Protection. And of course, there's a couple of links right there. The next step, and this is a whole topic in its own, okay? But I do want to mention where the marketplace is going for security, next generation cloud security. If you don't have something like an Arctic Wolf or like a Manage Engine or some sort of SIM solution, okay? If you don't have somebody watching security as a service, the next thing out there that Microsoft has for their plan is something like the Azure Sentinel. And what this is this is the one that's collecting all the information and all the auditing from both the inside of your organization, inside Office 365, even inside your on-premise, by the way. Mm-hmm. All of that gets pulled in, along with the advanced threats and the detects that they have, the intelligence, brings it all in to allow you to respond to it. In other words, it's a security operations center in the sky, automated, telling you something's going wrong here. There could be an inside player, there could be an outside player, but that's where they bring it all together. So they're a combination of a SIM or SIEM solution, whatever you want to say, and SOAR. And if you haven't heard SOAR, that's going to be something that comes out, and that's Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response.
Another acronym.
You're going to see that. You're going to see that more and more because once Microsoft puts their little paws in an acronym, it becomes the next one. But really, what it is, it's a security operations center with some sort of active response and telling you what you should do. So that's the next stage for, that's where it's going, all right? So just think of this, if you don't have or if you're looking for that type of next generation security, Microsoft is taking it there. But there's also a lot of third-party players that have been there for a long time as well, okay? So let's jump real quick. I don't see any, do we have any questions real quick?
Somebody made a nice comment saying that conditional access can be configured to require the device to be domain joined together.
That's exactly right.
Which is great because you can't access it from your local library.
Right, and here's another thing too. I think I had a thing on the slide is you could actually auto-join your devices to Azure Active Directory when they're joined to your domain, and you can do the reverse to make sure that only devices that are able to connect to those services are joined. So that's a really, really good way to secure.
So there's a lot to it.
Yeah, there is. So Teams, okay, so let's talk about Teams in a couple of different ways, okay? Let's talk about it from the operational, kind of the security overall of the actual application or the behind the scenes. So what they have for the built-in security, they have mutual TLS, which is server to server, okay? They use TLS for their client to server signaling, media flows, and they use SRTP TLS for their audio video sharing. That's the security that they put in there to encrypt it, okay? So that's just, you don't have to do anything to turn it on, it's already there. The second thing is Teams is tightly integrated into Azure Active Directory. So once again, if you want people using Teams and you want to be able to control what they can do, you have to have, the best thing would be is have them integrated into your domain, integrated into Azure Active Directory, control that identity, and then allow them to use Teams as you see fit. Okay, because Teams is more than just communications and meetings, right? The Teams apps also adhere to 365 security and data policies. So if you have Teams app, it will comply with MFA and conditional access. So hence why it's so important. It all comes around. When people started putting Microsoft Teams app that you can download from the Microsoft App Store or Apple App Store or whatever, when they start putting it on their mobile phone and just logging into Teams, if you didn't say, hold on, only on devices that we support and have conditional access, they would have been able to do that. Okay, so you got to get in front of the curve. So that's why it's important to have devices being enrolled. You don't want somebody grabbing Teams, because once you're in Teams, you now can see data and information on all teams that that person is allowed to. So again, it adheres to that. When you set up data protection, data loss, information sharing, all those policies, external sharing, Teams will also abide by those rules. They will adhere to the policy rules. That's why it's important to get those out there.
Oh, yeah.
It's really difficult to kind of step back in time, but people knew for a long time, okay, I'm not sure I'm going to have OA to the outside world, right? Well, now Teams is an app that can be to the outside world, and data can be shared. So for the same reason back in the day, it said, I don't want people to be sending documents via email without being scrutinized. You don't want somebody to send a document through Teams without being scrutinized. So you really do need to make sure that your document policies are in place, because if you say this document type of sensitive can never be shared outside the organization to somebody who doesn't have within the organization, Teams will abide by that as well. But if you don't have that policy, it's kind of hit or miss. If you put in application management policies or Intune, now you even have better security for Teams.
Fantastic.
The Teams admin portal allows the control of features, capabilities, and administrative roles down to the user or device identity. I.e., now they have phones that you can buy. You can go out to Yealink and get a fantastic little phone, and you can boot it up, and you can put in your username and password and your multi-factor, and it logs into Teams. If you didn't say, I don't want that, guess what? You could have people actually do that. So you just have to get in front of that. That's really what it is with Teams. Most of the 365 security policies are across all of the team functions like chat, Teams, calendars, and calls. So not all of them, but most of them. So make sure to set them up. From the administrative side, and this is really simple, whoops, went too far. This is this really boils down to least privilege access for the Teams users and administrators. Only give them access to what they need. You don't want to give your entire organization access to create Teams live events and start streaming to everybody publicly.
That's a butt dial I don't want to be a part of.
And let's guess, I mean, that's kind of a little bit dangerous there. You do want to configure your multi-factor. You should deploy it. You do want to configure a policy to prevent file download to unmanaged devices.
Yeah.
Very important. You don't want people to download information if you're not managing that device. It's as simple as that. Prevent and audit external sharing. Okay, you want to make sure that you know when somebody sent somebody outside your organization any type of sharing information. Again, configure Teams guest access controls for how you want your organization. If you want anybody and everybody to invite any type of guest into a Teams meeting, that's okay if you want that, okay? And again, the Teams administrative controls are how meetings and conferences and calls are conducted. That's from the administrative side. In the usage side, you need to configure access levels to create and manage your Teams channels and contents. Typically, because Teams is an animal, because you can create a Teams room or a Teams channel specifically. Well, we have our Teams for webinars. We have a Teams channel for webinars, but not everybody can get into that team channel and start to mess with the content, and that's by design. And so you really want to lay out your security of who can create teams, who can create the channels, and who can access the content. And that's done in the actual Teams, kind of like with the administrator level and the user level. You also want to configure how you allow meetings, meet now, presenting, sharing, that kind of stuff. So you may say you don't want to have the majority of your users do a meet now. You may want to, because what that does is it literally, they can take any person and say, I want to meet right now, and it will send them out an invite with a phone number to call, which in one respect is fantastic for collaboration and working with customers even, all right? But you may want to understand what that means, and you may want to control that a little bit.
Yeah.
So things like presenting, you may want to say you can present or share, but not to outside unless it's a live event. Again, it's all about how you want to protect your information. You can control who joins the meetings through lobby settings. So if somebody did a meet now and you allow guests and they could have participants come in, they could just literally join in with that phone number and you'd never even know they're there. You'd hear the beep, but other than that, you wouldn't know they're there, right? So you want to control who joins meetings through the lobby settings or by using structured meetings. A structured meeting, is more specific to the security. But if you just allow people to join and immediately go into the conference, it would be like us allowing people right into the WebEx and be joined right in and be live and on the WebEx with audio and video without being invited in. I mean, we know who's here, we know who's coming in, so that's one thing. But if you have a meeting where anybody can join, you probably want to control that a little bit more. There is a waiting area feature, and this can even be done for meetings that are scheduled within 5, 6, 7 people. You can do a waiting area to make sure that somebody allows you to come in. The biggest thing is to educate your staff on security practices, and this really comes down to should they share their screen or content. Do they want pop-ups coming up with little emails that people are, hey, hi, buddy? Probably not. You want to kind of control what goes on the screen when they're presenting. Video sharing, when to share, when not to share. How to do the audio and muting usage. This is training. I mean, you can turn some of these features on and off, but the bottom line is people need to know the etiquette. And that will heighten your security for teams because they're not doing something that they didn't think was a problem, okay? We've got a few more minutes. So third-party integration. How come my voice is always, a little straggly at this point?
Because you've been talking nonstop for almost 45 minutes.
Pretty much. All right, so third-party integration. So here's really what it is. The third party, they enhance the overall security and compliance of Microsoft 365. That is the bottom line, okay? When you have a third party, if you have an encryption and compliance DLP from Zix, right, that really does take things to the new level for email encryption where it's getting done, okay? A lot of those features in Microsoft 365, but third-party integrations are really, you should consider which ones are right and which ones can be done inside Office 365. It's layering the best of all of those, right? But some of the most common ones really is managed cloud compliance. That's ours. That's a call out to ours where we're watching the stuff. Backup solutions, Datto, Backupify, Veeam Backup for Office, making sure the data isn't deleted and then you can't get it back. We have had to go back and restore for customers again and again and again because of various reasons. And it's really easy to do with Backupify. Yep. Really easy to do with Veeam Backup as well. But these are important things to have because Microsoft doesn't back up your information. They just protect it from being destroyed, basically. And they protect it from their systems going down, not necessarily your systems going down, right. Or your people deleting it. MFA, Cisco Duo, great addition to it. Encryption compliance, DOP, Zigzag River, Sophos has a great email encryption and filtering as well. Availability, one of the things for availability, if Office 365 is not available, there are availability capabilities from AppRiver to where you can actually still see your mailbox. You can still see it. So you may have a set number of users that can still see email coming in and going out, even though it's not being delivered to Office 365 because it's kind of just sitting there. If Microsoft has an issue again. So there's a lot of things. Security and alerting. If you want somebody to be watching over everything and anything happening in 365 and take action, Arctic Wolf is. That's a layer that really is great because they're your security operations at the center. Yeah. And they are on top of it. All right. So very very smart to look at integrations to see what it will add. Also know there are several in Office 365 and Microsoft 365 that are there already. Plans for security. If you're on the lower level plans, okay, not enterprise plans, I would highly consider looking at the Microsoft 365 Business Premium to get all of these security features. And for a lot of people, I mean, that's a $20 a month plan, so it's not a huge plan there. That at a minimum, and they do have some lesser plans, but that really is where.
Why would you?
Yeah.
For $20, why would you?
Security features really start at that level anyway. Yeah. Enterprise plans, the Microsoft 365 Enterprise E3, I think it's like 33 or something like that, or 32, or the E5. E5 are the ones that include all those advanced security and threat detection features. So if you're going to take it to that next level, E5 is the place to go. If you only have Office 365 plans and they're enterprise, then the EM plus S adds a lot of these features to it, okay? So you can do it in that combination as well. A lot of these features required either P1 or P2 of the Azure Active Directory Premium. So again, these features and functionality is there because of these plans. That's why some of the Microsoft 365 Business Premium and Enterprise, they kind of lump it all in,
right.
So you get it, okay? Don't skimp on the security license. You can always add these as a la carte too, I guess. I mean, it's not a problem. But I'll tell you, breaches are a lot more expensive than, than the additional few.
It's fairly simple to convert from Office 365 to Microsoft 365.
Oh, piece cake.
Yeah.
You can do it in minutes,
right.
Literally in minutes. All right, so overall checklist. What do we got to do? Secure your entities, MFA is a must. Secure your information. Secure your communications, i.e. Teams and whatnot. Enable the alerting, auditing, and logging. Then what you have to do is you have to review it, and then you have to repeat it, and then you have to review it, and then you have to repeat it, right? So there we go. Most importantly, what do we have to do? Educate your users on security best practices. So there we go. Question and answers, Q&A. 11:47, 2 minutes over.
Not bad, well done. I think we got to all the questions that were asked during the seminar, so fantastic. I learned a lot, and I live this every day, so that's great. Thank you, Gary.
Absolutely.
Just a reminder, you're going to get a survey right after this is over, and if you'd like a copy of the slides, feel free to reach out to Kim here, or anybody can help you get those slides, and thanks so much for attending. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.